I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who tiptoed around her own apartment, afraid of the man she once thought she'd spend forever with. But there I was, 28 years old, sitting in a tiny cafe on Chicago's North Side, watching the ice melt in my coffee as I tried to remember how to breathe. 3 days. That's how long it had been since I left. 3 days since I grabbed a duffel bag and walked out of Jake's apartment. No, our apartment, before I could change my mind. 3 days of motel sheets that smelled like bleach, of flinching every time my phone buzzed, of wondering if he had figured out where I was. 3 days of freedom that didn't feel like freedom yet. The cafe was nearly empty, just me and an older couple tucked away in the corner, whispering in the intimate way of people who had spent a lifetime together. I used to believe Jake and I would grow into that kind of love, soft, steady, safe. But love with Jake had never been safe. The worst part? He had never even hit me. Not once. But the bruises he left weren't the kind you could see. They were the kind that lived under my skin, in the way I second-guessed every word before I spoke, how I held my breath when I heard his key turn in the lock, how I had stopped recognizing the girl in the mirror years ago. I used to laugh. I used to paint. I used to believe I was someone worth loving. But somewhere between his harmless jokes about how sensitive I was, his casual comments about my friends being bad influences, and the slow, systematic way he made me feel small, I disappeared. And now, even after finally leaving, I couldn't stop the questions from gnawing at me. What if I couldn't find an apartment in time? What if I couldn't afford rent alone? What if, God, what if I was making a mistake? Because as much as I knew Jake was toxic, leaving him meant facing something equally terrifying, myself. The version of me that had been slowly suffocated, the girl I had abandoned. Who was I without him? What did I even like anymore? My phone buzzed, cutting through my spiral of thoughts. I jumped. My heart hammered as I reached for it, my stomach twisting. A number I didn't recognize. Panic flared in my chest. What if it was Jake? What if he'd found a way to reach me, to pull me back in with his apologies and promises and the way he always knew exactly what to say to make me doubt myself? I hesitated, then swiped to answer. Hello? A woman's voice, warm, professional, filtered through the speaker. Hi, is this Sophie Reynolds? I blinked. Yes. This is Rebecca Carter from Westbridge PR in Denver. I know this is a bit out of the blue, but we came across your resume and were really impressed. We'd love to talk to you about an open position. Denver. I almost laughed. This had to be a mistake. I hadn't applied for a job in Denver. I hadn't applied for any jobs recently. I think you might have the wrong person, I said, voice shaky. I never applied for a job with your company. A brief pause. Actually, our records show that you submitted an application a few months ago. It looks like it may have been for a different role, but we have an opening that we think would be a great fit. A few months ago. Back when I was still too afraid to leave, but desperate enough to dream about it. I had spent late nights scrolling through job listings, sending out resumes in secret, wondering if some miracle would save me from the life I was drowning in. And then, when nothing happened, I let the fear win. I forgot all about it. Until now. I gripped my coffee cup tighter. I should have said no. I wasn't in a place to move across the country. I had no plan, no stability, nothing figured out. But somewhere beneath the fear, something else flickered, something that had been buried under years of self-doubt. Hope. This is your way out. The thought slid into my mind so clearly it felt like someone had whispered it to me. My pulse pounded in my ears. Denver wasn't just a city. It was distance. It was space between me and the memories I was trying to escape. It was a chance to rewrite everything. Can you tell me more about the position? I heard myself ask, the words out before I could stop them. Rebecca launched into a description of the role, an account manager position working with lifestyle and wellness brands. It paid well. It sounded exciting. But it wasn't just about the job. It was about getting away. About starting fresh in a city where Jake had no power over me. You don't have to decide right now, Rebecca added. If you're interested, we'd love to fly you out for an interview next week. A week. That was all the time I had to decide if I was brave enough to take this chance. I exhaled slowly, staring out the cafe window at the rain-slicked streets of Chicago. The city had been my home for years, but now it felt like a prison. Every corner held a memory I wanted to forget. Every shadow felt like it might be him. Maybe this was the universe throwing me a lifeline. Maybe this was the sign I had been waiting for. Maybe it was time to stop running in circles and start running forward. I think I'd like to come in for the interview. As soon as I said it, something inside me shifted. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. I barely remember the flight to Denver. It was a blur of airport announcements, recycled air, and the gnawing feeling that I was making a mistake. My mind was a battlefield, half of me screaming that I was running away, the other half whispering that I was finally escaping. I gripped my armrest so tightly during takeoff that my fingers went numb. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had spent years trapped in a relationship with Jake, suffocating under his control, but now that I had finally broken free, I was still afraid. I landed in a city I had never been to, lugging my suitcase through the terminal with a kind of stunned detachment. I kept waiting for the panic to set in, for the overwhelming realization that I had just left behind everything I knew, but it didn't come. Instead, there was just a quiet hum of something unfamiliar. Hope. Westbridge PR had booked a hotel for me, a sleek, modern place in downtown Denver, the kind of place where business professionals pass through with purpose. I checked in, took the keycard, and rode the elevator up to my room, staring at my reflection in the stainless steel doors. I looked the same brown hair, same tired eyes, but something was different. There was a new tension in my shoulders, a readiness, like my body was waking up from a long sleep. The interview was in the morning, and I barely slept. My mind kept conjuring worst-case scenarios. What if they realized I wasn't good enough? What if this was all a mistake? What if Jake somehow found me? Every noise in the hallway sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. But morning came, as it always does, and I forced myself out of bed, put on my best blazer, and walked into Westbridge PR with my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. The office was buzzing with energy. Glass-walled conference rooms, sleek desks, people moving with purpose. This wasn't just a job, it was a world. Rebecca met me in the lobby, her handshake firm, her smile warm. Nervous? She asked. I let out a breathless laugh. Terrified. She grinned. Good. That means it matters. The interview was intense, questions about my experience, my strengths, my ability to handle high-pressure situations. Halfway through, I caught myself, I'm doing it. I'm actually doing it. I wasn't just surviving the interview, I was nailing it. The passion I thought I had lost came roaring back. I loved this work. I was good at this work. By the time I walked out, I didn't know what to feel. I had convinced myself they wouldn't hire me. I wasn't the kind of woman who got second chances. But then, just a few hours later, my phone rang. We'd love to have you join our team, Sophie. I pressed a hand to my mouth, blinking back tears. You would? Rebecca laughed. We would. You're exactly what we're looking for. I barely heard anything after that. I was too busy trying to process the fact that, for the first time in a long time, something was going right. I had a job. I had a future. I had escaped. The first few weeks in Denver were harder than I expected. The silence in my tiny new apartment felt foreign. I had never lived alone before. Some nights, I still found myself listening for the sound of Jake's footsteps outside the door, even though I knew he wasn't there. The fear didn't vanish overnight. It clung to me in ways I couldn't control, flinching when a man walked too close behind me on the sidewalk, double-checking the locks, waking up in the middle of the night with my heart racing. But then, something happened. I started living. I threw myself into my work, staying late, taking on projects with the kind of hunger I hadn't felt in years. I made friends, real friends, who didn't see me as broken or fragile. Julia, my coworker, pulled me into office banter. Eric, the guy from accounting, taught me how to navigate Denver's food scene. I went out for drinks. I laughed. I started painting again, buying cheap canvases and splattering them with colors just for the sake of it. And then, one weekend, Julia convinced me to go hiking. "You live in Colorado now," she said, dragging me out of my apartment at 7 in the morning. "You have to see the mountains." The old Sophie would have made excuses. But this new version of me, the one who had survived, who was still fighting, said yes. We drove out of the city, the skyline shrinking in the rearview mirror, replaced by towering peaks that took my breath away. The hike was brutal, steep inclines, burning lungs, legs shaking with exhaustion. But then, as I climbed higher, something changed. The view opened up before me, endless blue sky, golden light spilling over the valleys below. And standing there, at the summit, I felt it, peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running. I was standing still, exactly where I was meant to be. I wasn't Sophie, the girl who had been trapped in a toxic relationship. I wasn't Sophie, the woman who had spent years shrinking herself to fit someone else's expectations. I was just Sophie. And I was free. There are moments in life that define you, not the ones you expect, not the grand milestones or the carefully planned achievements, but the quiet, unexpected ones. For me, it wasn't getting the job, or moving to Denver, or even reaching that mountaintop. It was a Tuesday afternoon, standing in my tiny kitchen, barefoot, stirring a pot of soup. It hit me out of nowhere. I was happy. Not just relieved. Not just better than before. Not just surviving. I was happy. It had been months since I moved to Denver. Months since I had packed my life into a suitcase and left behind the girl who flinched at shadows. Months since I had spoken Jake's name out loud. And in all that time, I had built something new, something that belonged only to me. I had a home now, a small apartment filled with secondhand furniture and paintings I made myself. My job at Westbridge PR wasn't just a job, it was a passion. I had friends who called just to check in, who dragged me out for trivia nights, who knew my favorite coffee order. And for the first time in years, I had hobbies, real, genuine joys that were mine alone. Hiking became more than just an escape, it became a ritual. Every weekend, I found a new trail, new peaks to conquer, new ways to remind myself how far I had come. There was something about the mountains, the way they stood, unmoving, powerful, that made me feel the same way. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding. I was choosing this life. And then, one day, out of nowhere, Jake called. I saw the number flash on my screen, and my body reacted before my brain could catch up. My stomach twisted, my fingers went cold, my breath hitched. The past rushed in like a wave, like no time had passed at all. For a single, horrible second, I was her again. The girl who held her breath when he walked into the room. The girl who softened her voice, who said, "I'm sorry," before he could even tell her what she'd done wrong. Then I exhaled. And I hit decline. Just like that. I stood there, staring at my phone, waiting for the panic to come. But it didn't. There was no fear, no guilt, no second guessing. Just silence. Just peace. I deleted his number. I blocked it. And then I went back to my soup. Months turned into a year. And in that year, I became someone I never thought I could be. Stronger. Happier. Whole. The scars of my past were still there, of course. They always would be. But they no longer defined me. I no longer flinched when someone raised their voice. I no longer apologized just for existing. I no longer carried the weight of Jake's voice in my head, whispering that I wasn't enough. Because I was enough. I didn't need someone else to tell me that anymore. I had proved it to myself, every single day. At work, I was thriving. I got promoted. I led meetings. I walked into rooms with my head held high. People listened when I spoke, not because I was trying to make myself small, not because I was carefully choosing words that wouldn't upset someone, but because I had something to say. I redecorated my apartment, filling it with bright colors, warm lights, and plants I actually managed to keep alive. I started going to yoga, something I never thought I'd enjoy, and found myself stretching in the morning, breathing deeply, feeling connected to my body in a way I never had before. I traveled. Alone. One weekend, I booked a cabin in the mountains, just me, my sketchbook, and complete silence. I made a fire. I cooked a meal just for myself. I sat outside and watched the stars, realizing how vast the world was and how much of it I had yet to see. I learned to love my own company. And then, one crisp autumn morning, as I stood on a rocky peak, staring out at the golden red treetops below, I realized something. I hadn't just escaped Jake. I had rebuilt myself. I had become a woman who was no longer afraid to take up space, who no longer questioned whether she deserved happiness. A woman who laughed loudly, who hiked to the tops of mountains just to feel the wind against her skin, who painted messy, vibrant canvases without worrying if they were good enough. A woman who had won. I share this because I know someone reading this might be where I was. Afraid. Doubting themselves. Wondering if they're strong enough to leave, if they'll ever be whole again. You will. I won't lie and say it's easy. It's hard. It's terrifying. There will be nights where you miss them, not because you want to go back, but because familiarity is addictive. There will be moments where you wonder if you imagined the bad parts, if you were too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. You weren't. You deserve peace. You deserve a life that is entirely, beautifully yours. And I promise you, when you finally step into it, when you wake up one day and realize you're truly happy, not because of anyone else, not because you're trying to prove something, but simply because you are free, you will understand why you fought so hard to get here. So, to the girl I used to be, the one who thought she would never make it out, who believed she wasn't strong enough, who thought happiness belonged to other people, you did it. You made it. And you are free. Have you ever had a moment where you realized you had truly moved on? Let's talk about it in the comments. Your story might be the one that inspires someone else.